Right. So today we're going to talk about how to actually some canonical clauses. Well, every canonical clause is composed of a subject and a predicate. And today we are going to discuss this subject. The subject, which is classically considered to be the performer of the action, we have discussed this. This is a definition that will not do all the time. And then uh, we'll have to see other definitions that would contemplate state of being verbs. Okay. Uh, for this, I brought you a video. Okay. I was searching on the web and I found a video class that is pretty much interesting. And based on this video class, we will extend the examples and discuss the concepts. Unfortunately, I lost the link of the video class, so I cannot give the credit. But it's over YouTube. If you type syntax of English, you'll probably find these and other videos by this guy. He's really good. Only his board organization is not that perfect, but who am I to say something? Yeah. So let's take a look. I guess I'll have to go to the video itself.
If you're listening to this lecture, you probably know speak English pretty well already. I'm using many complicated sentences, and they're difficult to understand if you're just speaking English. So you might say, well, why do we need to go back to the basics, even if it's just for a moment? Well, if we learn how different sentences work together, we can think more clearly about trigger sentences, which aren't so clear. Alright, so let's take probably one of the easiest sentences I can come up with. John teaches. Right? If I ask people, well, identify parts of it. If I ask people to identify the parts of this, they might say, well, this is a noun and this is a verb. Maybe you're right. But that's just identifying what type of word this is, right? It's like saying that's a maple tree and that's a rose, right? It doesn't tell me how these words work together, what function they play in this sentence. By the way, this is often called a clausal sentence because it's basically the same thing as a clause. You might know what clause is yet. I will treat it within a few lectures from now, but for now, just know that it's the most basic type of sentence.
Okay. So keep this in mind. This is a clausal sentence, which means it's a sentence made up by only one clause. Okay. Now, if you take John teaches, does that definition, the subject is the one that performs the action, does it fit here? Is it enough to describe? Yes, because as John teaches, he is doing the action of teaching. Okay, now, if you think about other kinds of sentences, you see that it's always not like that, and he will introduce us other kinds of sentences. As the video goes on, I'll be commenting on it, and if you need some pause, if you don't understand some part of the video, please ask me, I'll pause it, we discuss, we go back.
Which are not what we're talking about. So, John teaches. What is John? What is this noun have to do? Well, it is a subject, right? Nouns can be a lot of things. They can be the objects, or they can be the subjects. In this case, the noun is the subject. What is this verb doing? Well, this verb is acting as the predicate. And this is sentence of a clause is that it's a group of words because of a subject and a predicate. And we need to know what they actually are. That's going to be the topic of the next two lectures. Now, in this first one, we'll just talk about what subjects are. And people often say, well, subjects do the verb, right? The subject has the verb. Well, that's certainly true with and a bit more like an apple. Eating, right? So here, the subject is the verb. However, let's turn this around and make it passive, right? The apple was eaten. And apples grow. Apple.
Okay, is he working with a canonical structure? Is he working with a canonical structure? No, and this is one of the problems. So, when it comes to non-canonical structures, to non-canonical clauses, the definition, the subject does the verb, does not work pretty much well. Okay? He's working with a clause that is in passive voice. And then we'll see the problems. He will question, well, what can apples really do? Apples can rot, apples can fall from the apple tree, but in that case, when apples are eaten, they are not doing anything. The one who eats the apple is doing something. So let's take a look at the explanation.
Wrong. Right? The subject includes business. Well, they don't do anything to do with eating, right? You get eating. So in this case, the apple is not functioning as the thing that does the verb. Instead, some people will say it's the topic. Now that seems to be a little bit stronger because it's true for both of these, right? I'm talking about this sentence. What did I do? Well, I ate an apple. The apple is the topic of the sentence. What happened to the apple? Well, the apple was eaten. Now, that's to some extent. Let's take a look at a few situations where it doesn't quite hold up. Or maybe partially hold up. Let's take a look at where it partially holds up. It's nice. It's nice to have you as a friend. Well, already this isn't quite as simple as it could be. Let's just take a look at how this sound works. It's nice. What's nice? It's nice to have you as a friend. But what is it? Well, actually, it looks forward to this verb here to have, right? Another thing is having you as a friend is nice. Alright, so I guess having you as a friend is the topic of the sentence, but still it's kind of confusing to have this pronoun stuck at the front. Alright, well you say you can sort of solve that one, but I've got one that's a little bit harder to solve. How about this one? It's nice too, but it is nice, or sorry, it is raining. How about that one? Here we go. It is raining. Now you might say, well, surely it refers to something, but what? I can't say the weather is raining. That's not a very good sentence. We don't say weather is raining. And we don't say clouds are raining. It is raining. What is it? I don't know. Right? That's the truth. It is raining. It's one of these funny English sentences. So English has these funny subjects which don't and they aren't a topic, right? Um, so we started off knowing what a subject was. And you kind of like an onion, maybe, right? We look at this onion, well, I know what an onion is. Let's peel off this outer layer and make sure that it's an onion. So we have a smaller onion. And we keep on peeling our onion until, poof, it vanishes at the end. Does this mean there was nothing to a subject? Is there such thing as a subject? Certainly not, but we have to decide for now in English. And what I mean by that is I need to look at how it works in a sentence. Well, there's how clues that a certain word or a certain phrase is a subject. Okay? One of these clues is that it usually comes before the verb. Usually before the verb.
Okay, so now we are doing what Saussure suggested us to do. Yeah, the subject is what the predicate is not. Okay, we are defining linguistic units in relation to other linguistic units instead of trying to give functional definitions. Okay, he showed that the definition for the one who does the action does not do all the time. The definition as the topic of the sentence does not fit for it is raining because we don't know what it exactly is. Is it the weather, the clouds, the water? We don't know. Okay? And now he will try to give us a definition based on the relationship between the subject and the other part of the clause called the predicate. The sentence, sorry. The other part of the sentence.
That should be an H. Usually for the so I could use a sentence like he is nice, right? He is nice. Is the verb? He is subject. The subject does it before the he is. Is there anything else? Well, yeah, the verb and subject. The subject and the verb usually have to agree. Not usually, they do have to agree. There's an agreement between them, right? What? Change it to they. Need a bigger T there. They. My goodness. All right. They
Puxou
are
dois.
nice. Just nice. They are subjects. You should cause the verb to change. Right? Sometimes it will end up being the same for the verb, but the verb needs to agree with the subject. Right?
Anyway, mathematically, we could represent that as they equals nice. He equals nice. We equals nice. Which means the pronoun or the noun and the adjective nice have an equality relationship. The one that is nice is the same one that is substituted by the pronoun. Okay? And then we'll see that there is a name for that in grammar. Okay? Which is, I think, predicative complement. We are going to talk about that.
Another marker of the subject. Another one is if we look at when we look at questions, particularly closed questions. That's question and answer. Do they invert the order? Do they change the order? Well, in this case, certainly. Yeah, if we look at that first sentence, he is nice. The question form is he nice? The question of this is, are they nice? So these are the patterns subjects fall into. And this is a more reliable way to determine what the subject is than to simply say the subject as the verb or is the topic of the verb. However, I must admit, these two guidelines are often true. Subject is often the thing indeed that does do the verb or is the topic of the sentence. But it's important to realize that that's not really how we define it. It's the thing that comes before the verb. Okay. All right, and next lecture, we'll look at predicate and how it works.
Okay, so what can we conclude from this lecture is that although the definition that the subject is the one that does the verb or it's the topic of the sentence, they work, they are not precise, they are not accurate, and then we need a more accurate way to define it. And the best way to define it is saying that the subject is that element in the sentence that comes before the verb in a canonical clause, yeah, and that is inverted with the verb, in most cases with the auxiliary verb, to form questions. You learned this in book 1 of your English courses, yeah, but maybe you never realized that this would be the best definition of a subject, yeah. So as you define it, you also define the grammatical rules that govern the interrogative form of the language, and the negative form of the language. Uh, so we are now starting talking about the subject, okay, in clausal sentences, in sentences composed by only one clause, okay. This clause can be split into subject and predicate as we saw. So let's take the case they study. Very easy. Just like the video. They study. We have to split it first of all into subject and predicate. We have study as the predicate. Okay? And they as the subject. Okay? Now study is the verb, and the verb in charge of the predicate, the element in charge of the predicate, we call predicator. And I'll talk about it. Please don't make confusion. A predicate is not a predicator. Every predicate has a predicator inside it. Okay? Study is the head of the predicate. That's why I say it's the predicator. The predicator is the word in charge of the predicate. What does that mean? It's the most important word, the word that will give the predicate the action, in fact. Yeah, I'm talking about action, but please consider state of being. Okay, we talk about action because it's easier to define. It's more, let's say, pedagogical. In the case above, the predicator has nothing to take care of. The predicator is the only element of the predicate, but that's not always like that. Okay? We say then that the predicate is made up of only one predicator. Okay? And nothing else. There is no complement as we are used to. Okay? Now if I said they study English, the predicator would still be study. Okay? And English is what they study. English is the object. Okay? They study English. In this case, the direct object. Let's take the case of I am a student. Well, syntactical analysis of this subject. Sorry. And I bought a car. Let's take these two examples compared. In I am a student, where is the subject? I am a student is the predicate. Okay, now, where is the predicator in I am a student? What is the word that is in charge of the predicate? Well, could I represent that sentence as I equals a student? Mathematically. The student and I, are we talking about the same thing? Okay? Yeah. And who is the element in the sentence that makes up this function of relating I and a student? Am. Yeah? It establishes a relation between I, the subject, and I, student, what this I effectively is. I is wonderful, yeah? What this I effectively am? Well, now I don't know, because the I I'm talking about is not I, it's the other I. Oh my god, I'm confused. Well, anyway, am a student is the predicate whose head is am. The predicator is am, right? A student is a noun phrase that works as a noun. Remember, definition of a noun phrase. A noun phrase normally works as either as the subject or object in the sentence, sometimes as a complement. Okay? So a student works as a noun and is linked. Okay? This noun, because we take pronouns as the same category as nouns, this word that links one noun to the other in a relation of equality is the predicator, which I symbolize by the letter P, okay? In I bought a car, I have a very similar example, a very simple sentence. I bought a car, in which bought a car is the predicate. Now I ask you, what is the predicator in bought a car? Can I represent that as I equals a car? No. That's the same problem as I ate an apple. I'm not the apple. Yeah? So there is no relationship of equality, and we'll see that there is a different implication in analyzing the noun phrase involved in the predicate. Okay? In I bought a car, I did something, I did some action to the car. What is the element in the predicate that is in charge of explaining this relationship between myself and the car? The verb. Okay? The predicator. Okay? The predicator of a predicate is normally the main verb. That's pretty much easy to understand why, because it relates subject and object. Okay? A car is also a noun phrase. Okay? So what's the big difference between a student and a car if they are both noun phrases? In I am a student, okay, I am something, okay? I should have chose a different color in am just to make sure I is the subject, red subject, and some other color am, the verb. In I bought a car, okay, we also have a car as the object. So, take a look at the relationship between I and a student. I equals a student. A student refers back to what I am. I and student are in a relationship of equality. Okay? A student describes I, so I call it a predicative complement. What do we call that in Portuguese? I think we call that predicativo do sujeito. That's it, okay? In English we call it predicative complement. Oops. I don't want Wi-Fi. Thank you. Okay. Now, take the relationship between a car and I. Sorry. I have to say that predicative complements describe something else in the sentence. Okay? So, predicative complements always refer back to some other element in the sentence. Okay? Now, in I bought a car, the relationship between a car and the other elements is not necessarily with the subject, but with the verb to buy. Okay? This noun phrase, a car, is now the object of the sentence. Take a look. I cannot say that a student is the object of the sentence because I cannot be the object of myself. Yeah? A student describes the subject, whereas a car explains what has been bought. Is that clear? The difference between predicative complements and objects? Do you have any questions about this? Let's move on. Take the case of they are nice. Nice is an adjective. If we consider it as a phrase, nice is an adjective phrase. Now, what is the function of they are nice? Object or predicative complement? Predicative complement. Why? Who explains that for me? Yes, nice is what they are. Yeah? So they equals nice. Okay, describes they. Very good. Okay? It's a subjective predicative complement. Okay? Because it's describing the subject. Now, let's take one more example. I gave him a book. First of all, we have to split this sentence into subject and predicate. Hands up. Gave him a book. Of course, everybody knows this is the predicate. Now, where's the predicator? Gave. Okay? Gave is the predicator. Very good. Now, where is the predicative complement or the object? The object, yeah. A book and I am not a book. So I can either have given him a book, have received a book, we do something to the book. A book is the object. Direct or indirect? Direct, because we have no preposition. Important, remember, some verbs that in Portuguese are direct, in English may be indirect. Like listen, yeah? Escutar música, but listen to music. Okay, so pay attention to this. Well, we'll talk about object, direct, and indirect later, but as you know the theory, because you had syntax in Portuguese, it's always nice to ask. Now, him. We didn't classify him. What is him? Very good. So now we have a consistent explanation for the fact that we call these kinds of pronouns, him, her, them, as objective pronouns. Okay, because they play the role of object. Okay. Now, book is the object, and him is also the object. Okay. It's the direction where the giving goes. I gave this to him. And to is a preposition, which indicates a position or a direction. So, the book is the object that gets given, is the direct object, whereas him is the indirect object. Teacher, but him gave him. Where is the preposition? Where is the preposition? The preposition is implicit in the paraphrase of the sentence. I gave a book to him. Okay, you have to understand these pronouns, and we do not have. I don't think we have this in English. Yes, lhe. Eu lhe dei o livro, né? Eu dei-lhe o livro. Agora eu não vou saber se é um caso de próclise ou de, enfim. But we have to consider the nomenclature of these pronouns. They are called objective pronouns because they play a role of object of the action of giving. Okay? Is this clear for you? Do you have any questions? We're almost there, okay? Let's move on. We drove her crazy. Well, subject. Come on, you have to be interactive. Subject. We drove her crazy is the predicate. What is the predicator? Drove. We crazy. Okay? So, who establishes a relationship between we, her, and crazy is the verb to drive. Now, her. What is the function of her? You told me just before, if him is the object, her, being the same grammatical class, is also the... We drove her crazy. Is the... I don't know if it's direct or indirect. We are not talking about this right now, but it's certainly the object. It's an object. Okay? But this is still the direction of the action. We drove her crazy. Her looks like the one to whom we directed our action of driving crazy. Is the object of the action. Remember how we call him, her, them, us. Oh my god. Uh, remember how we call him, her, them, us? What kind of pronouns? Objective pronouns, which means they play the role of the object, which may be direct or indirect, but certainly the object. In this case, we caused her to change her mood. Her is the direct object, okay? Because we caused someone to do something, okay? We drove her crazy. We directly acted in relation to her to drive her crazy. And what about crazy? How can I classify crazy? We drove her crazy. Is crazy related to we, to drive, the verb to drive, or to her? Very good, Alessandro. Can you repeat that? It's a predicative complement. The subject is doing something to her, and crazy is what her is. What she is. She is crazy. She equals crazy. Or if you prefer, her equals crazy. Definition of predicative complement. It refers back to something else in the sentence. Is it the case? Is it referring back to some element in the sentence? Yes, to her. Okay? And it establishes a relationship between this element describing it. She or her, the pronoun her, and crazy. Crazy describes her. Okay? It's what we call objective predicative complement because it refers back to the object, which is her. Let's remember, let's go back. I am a teacher. A teacher, predicative complement. A subjective predicative complement. Why? Because it refers back to the subject. We drove her crazy. Is also a predicative complement, but in this case it's objective because it refers back to her, which is the object of the sentence. Okay, the direct object. Any question about predicative complements? Okay. So, in English, we have basically 5 canonical structures to compose a sentence, okay? Based on the idea of subject, predicate, and predicative complement, direct and indirect object, okay? The first one is the most basic one, I run. In this case, I have subject and predicate. Now, what kind of predicate is this? Run. It's the simplest predicate we have, formed by only one predicator, and by this way, by doing so, by having a sentence like this, I have what I call a most basic and simple kind of sentence, which is a clausal sentence. A sentence composed of only one clause, and whose predicate is only the verb. We have a structure like subject, predicate, and predicative complement. I am a runner. In this case, a runner equals I, or I equals a runner. It's what I am. Okay? Where is the predicator? Am, which establishes the relationship between I and a runner. The third possible pattern, the third possible structure is subject, predicate, and direct object. Like in I teach English. Okay? Now, I, verb, in this case an action, I do some action in relation to English. English is the object, the direct object of my teaching, okay, and I as the subject. Another possible pattern: I teach him, or I teach you, I teach them syntax. In this case, I have a subject, a predicate, an indirect object, which is the direction of my action or state of being, and a direct object, which is what I effectively teach. Okay? And subject, predicate, direct object, and predicative complement. I made them angry. In this case, I, as the subject, made them angry as a predicate composed of a predicator. Okay, I'm saying verb. Sorry, I was saying verb, but in fact we talk about the verb now as a predicator. Okay, a predicator, a direct object, and a predicative complement. A direct object, then I made someone, yeah, who makes something or someone do something, okay, and angry, which is what I caused you to be, okay. So we call the clauses about the subject intransitive clauses, and those about uh, the transition to the word outside the subject, transitive clauses. Okay, we are going to talk about them. Okay, is this okay for you? This five canonical structures. Okay, these are the five possible arrangements of the elements in a clause. Now, we have to investigate clauses versus sentences, okay? Intransitive and they start again with the Marseillaise. Oh my god. Getting fed up. So, the intransitive and transitive clauses can be joined together to form more complex sentences. Okay? These clauses will be connected by what we call conjunctions. Conjunctions that we decided to approach separately as coordinators and subordinators. Okay? And when we have sentences like this, we call them compound sentences. Basically, idea 1, idea 2. Idea 1 and idea 2. Meaning 1. Idea 1 but idea 2. Meaning 1A. Idea 1, however, idea 2, meaning 1B, and so on. That's hard. Okay. Now, all clauses are sentences, okay? But sentences can have more than one clause, from where we conclude that the clause is a most basic unit, okay? Then we have compound sentences. Take a look. I watched the game and it was exciting. I watched the game is an idea that is enough on its own. If I tell you I watched the game, all of you understand what I mean by I watched the game. If I tell you it was exciting, if it is clearly marked in the sentence, you will probably understand the sentence without any kind of problem. Now, when I join these two sentences, I have a relationship of coordination. What is a relationship of coordination? When no part of the sentence is more important than the other. Yeah. Now, take a look at I ate a snack because I was hungry. Okay? You say, okay, Ushua, I can understand I ate a snack. And I can understand I was hungry. Okay? But this comes as a consequence of the clause before. This relationship is a relationship of subordination. in which this action is necessarily subordination to the fact of sorry. The first action, I ate a snack, is subordinated to the very first basic idea that I was hungry. Sorry. It's the best way. I don't know if only meaning. It's the best way to analyze meaning. I really don't know, Kabila. I would have to take a look at it and tell you later on. Okay. But if you drop and put a period, meaning would be the same. But if you drop because, meaning is lost. Okay? What do I mean by meaning is lost? You still have meaning, but not exactly the same meaning that this first action came as a consequence of the second one. Okay? Of course, I could have it reversed. I was hungry, so I ate a snack. I would have the same idea. Sorry? Yeah, and I'll have to talk to the French teacher about this because the first time we can stand with, but I don't know. The class will tell, or if you would like to go to another place, but I don't think we have enough time. I put it into your hands. I'll do like Poncio Pilatus. I wash my hands. What do you think? Let's try to move on. And if you don't, no, okay, yeah. 9:05 já? Então eu tô bagunçado aqui que eu tô ainda com 8:58. Well, anyway, if you have problems understanding this right now, you always have the benefit of the video. Okay, so take a look at the video and talk to me, but that's okay. Let's move on. Let's move on. At least one more slide. So, I won't go very far in this business of clauses and sentences because I'd like to discuss with you something a little bit more important for teaching. We have to consider we are in a per-service course and that you are all going to be teachers, although you have other possibilities. Yeah. So let's talk about verbs and inflection. Remember, we talked about inflectional suffixes. Okay. We can go back later on exercises on coordination and subordination, but for now, I'd like to give brief definitions of each element. Uh, we have seen those inflectional morphemes. Now, what is really inflection? Verbs, as you know, have a number of inflectional morphemes or inflectional forms that are permitted or required for some grammatical constructions. The present form, for example, of takes can occur as the verb of a canonical clause, whereas the past participle taken cannot. Okay, so from now on, we are going to represent grammatical classes normally. Grammatical clauses normally, and the non-grammatical ones with an asterisk before it. Okay, every time you see a clause and the asterisk before it, it means ungrammatical. Okay, in linguistics, we don't say the sentence is wrong. We say it's ungrammatical. Okay. So, she takes care, but not she taken care. So, in this position, okay, between the subject and what she effectively takes, only the form inflected for the third person singular is possible. The participle form is not allowed, okay? As you know, some forms have a place to occur, okay? They have a place, a context for occurring. Sorry. So, the inflectional forms of the verbs are the following, okay? The great majority of the verbs, lexemes, have 6 inflectional forms in English. The preterite, the third singular present, the plain present, which we normally call infinitive. Which we normally call infinitive without to. Yeah, it's the plain present. The plain form, the gerund participle, because it can either be gerund or participle, and the past participle. So the preterite is classically given by the final ed, yeah, the final ed, the morpheme ed. Is it always like that? Of course not. You have the irregular verbs, okay? But being irregular means that they do not have this preterite form. They happen to have exactly a form to represent that preterite, which is an allomorph of ed. And now you can see the link, the bridge between morphology and syntax. Okay? The final ed is also in the word ate, the past of the verb to eat. The final ed is there with another graphic representation, with another phonetics, but it's the same morpheme. Okay? The third singular present, the final s, ies, and all of its allomorphs. Okay? It only occurs in simple present, okay? As in, she checks the figures herself. Whereas the plain present, they check the figures themselves. What's the big difference between she checks the figures herself and they check the figures themselves? Are these two sentences here? These two sentences I'm pointing, this one and this one, in a different verb tense or in the same verb tense? It's the same verb tense. They are different forms of talking about the present. I have the plain present, which is the classical verb in the infinitive without to, and I have a third person singular form for it. Okay, but they are exactly the same verb tense. So please don't make confusion between verb tense and inflectional morphemes. Okay, the final ed, okay, the final s is an inflectional morpheme, but not having the final s does not mean it's not in the verb tense of those words that have it. Okay? The plain form. She may check the figures herself. The plain form, although looks like to be the same as the plain present, is this really a present tense? She may check the figures herself. Am I really talking about the present when I say she may check the figures herself, or about a possible future? I'm talking about a future possibility, okay? So the plain form is the infinitive, okay? Used after the so-called anomalous verbs, okay? The infinitive after may, after should, after could, after ought to, okay? Then, the gerund participle. She is checking the figures herself. Okay, this ing here indicates what she is doing. So she's taking part of the action of checking the figures. Okay, in this case, it's gerund and it's also a participle. It's gerund because it indicates that the action is continuous, and it's a participle because she's taking part in the action. Okay, and the past participle, she had checked the figures herself. Okay, that may be confused with the preterite, but we saw that these two morphemes, add and add, are in fact only, very good, Vivi, homophones. okay? Because they play a different role, not a different whole, a different role. Whereas this happens after an auxiliary verb had, okay? So it's not the only verb in the verbal capsule. This first one, she checked the figures, happens right after the subject as the main and only verb in the verbal capsule. Okay? We'll talk about verbs next class. Okay? And I'll try to bring you some exercises on coordination and subordination so that we can practice a bit and make it a little bit more clear what do we mean by coordination, subordination, how to find this relationship. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. Okay, I'm trying to get better. Okay, I have been talking to my fellows of formal linguistics, trying to get better, and also to Monica Cruz that has